Guts opened his eyes to cold metal and the hum of ship engines. His first instinct was to reach for Dragonslayer. The massive sword was there, leaning against the wall of whatever cell they'd put him in. Good. That meant whoever had taken him wasn't completely stupid. The last thing he remembered was a fight. There was always a fight. Apostles, demons, something that needed killing. Then darkness, and a sensation of being pulled through something that wasn't quite space. The feeling had been familiar in the worst way, like the branded scar on his neck burning with recognition. Now he was here. Wherever here was. The cell door opened with a pneumatic hiss. 3 figures entered, and Guts's eye narrowed as he assessed them. The first was human, or human enough, wearing ornate armor decorated with skulls and purity seals. His face was scarred, one eye replaced with a mechanical implant that glowed red. Behind him stood 2 massive armored figures, easily 8 feet tall, carrying weapons that looked like they could punch through castle walls. "Guts of Midland," the scarred man said, his voice carrying authority. "I am Inquisitor Matthias Varak of the Ordo Malleus. You have been conscripted." Guts stood slowly, his hand moving to Dragonslayer's hilt. "I don't get conscripted, and I sure as hell don't take orders." "You misunderstand. This is not a request." Varak gestured, and a holographic display materialized in the air. It showed a planet, half of its surface covered in what looked like spreading rot. "This is Gallus Prime. 6 months ago, it was an imperial hive world with a population of 4 billion. Now it is a festering wound in reality, corrupted by the ruinous powers." "I don't care about your world or your powers," Guts said flatly. "Send me back." "Back to where? Your world is gone. The entity you call the God Hand tore a hole in reality trying to consume your soul. That hole connected to our universe, and you fell through." Varak's mechanical eye focused on Guts with unnerving precision. "You cannot return, but you can fight. And from what we've observed, fighting is what you do best." Guts's jaw clenched. The God Hand, always the God Hand. Even across dimensions they haunted him. "I've seen your exploits," Varak continued. "You've slaughtered hundreds of demonic entities in your world, beings you call apostles. In our universe we call them daemons, and Gallus Prime is infested with them." The holographic display shifted, showing cities twisted into impossible geometries. Structures that hurt to look at. Masses of flesh and metal fused together, and throughout it all, things that moved with wrong angles and too many limbs. 4 billion people, Varak repeated. Most are dead. Many have been transformed into chaos-spawn mutated abominations that exist only to spread corruption. Some have willingly turned to the dark gods, becoming cultists who sacrifice their fellow humans for demonic power. And at the center of the corruption, daemons manifest freely, feeding on the suffering. Guts looked at the images. He'd seen similar horrors during the eclipse. Seen people he knew transformed into monsters. Seen friends die screaming. "What do you want from me?" "Purge it. All of it. Kill every cultist, every daemon, every corrupted thing, until nothing remains but ash." Varak stepped closer. The Imperium would normally deploy full Space Marine chapters for this level of corruption. We would wage war for months, losing thousands of soldiers. But you, he gestured to Dragonslayer, you are different. You've been killing demons since before you could grow a proper beard. You wear armor that should not exist, wielding a sword that defies logic. And most importantly, you are already damned. "Watch your mouth," Guts growled. "It's not an insult. It's an observation. You bear a mark, the brand of sacrifice. It makes you a beacon for demonic entities. They are drawn to you like moths to flame. On Gallus Prime, that makes you the perfect weapon. Deploy you to the surface, and every demon on the planet will feel your presence. They will come for you, and you will kill them." "And if I refuse?" Varak smiled without humor. "Then I leave you in this cell for eternity. Or I could execute you and be done with it. But I don't think you want either of those options. I think you want exactly what I'm offering, a world full of demons to kill. Purpose, direction, revenge, even if it's not against your God Hand." Guts was quiet for a long moment. He looked at Dragonslayer, the blade that had drunk the blood of 100 apostles, the sword that had become an extension of his hatred. "I kill demons," he said finally. "That's what I do. Point me at them." Varek's smile widened. "Excellent. Prepare for deployment. We drop you to the surface in 1 hour." As Guts was led through the ship's corridors, he took in his surroundings. The vessel was massive, far larger than any ship he'd seen in his own world. The walls were decorated with skulls, eagles, and religious iconography that seemed to worship both faith and violence in equal measure. They passed through a chamber filled with robed figures working at strange machines. Tech priests, Varek called them. Servants of something called the machine god. They stopped their work to stare at Guts as he passed, their mechanical implants whirring with interest. "Your armor," one of them said, voice distorted by Vox speakers. "It defies analysis. The material is unknown. The construction method impossible to replicate, yet it functions." "It works," Guts said. "That's all I need to know. But how does it work? What powers it? What maintains its structural integrity under stress that should shatter any known alloy?" Guts looked at the tech priest. "It drinks blood. Mine." "That's how it works." The tech priest recoiled as if struck. Heretical, abominable, fascinating. They moved on, eventually reaching what Varek called the deployment bay. It was a cavernous space filled with drop pods, reinforced metal coffins designed to punch through a planet's atmosphere and deliver soldiers directly to war. "Zones. You'll deploy alone," Varek explained. "Your pod will be targeted at the primary hive city where corruption is thickest. Once you land, you're on your own. Fight your way to the center of the corruption, a massive warp rift in the city's core. Close it, and the demonic infestation will collapse." "How do I close it?" "Kill everything maintaining it. Cultists, daemons, whatever you find. Remove the anchors keeping the rift stable, and reality will snap back into place." "Simple enough." Varek gestured to the drop pod. "One more thing. The berserker armor you wear, it will attract demonic attention. Your brand of sacrifice, even more so. The moment you land, everything on that planet will know you're there. They will come for you in waves, hundreds, thousands. Are you prepared for that?" Guts stepped into the drop pod and grabbed Dragonslayer. "I've been fighting waves of demons since I was 24. Let them come." Varek nodded to the tech priests, who began sealing the pod. As the metal doors closed, Varek's voice came through a Vox speaker. "The Imperium has a saying, Guts of Midland, blessed is the mind too small for doubt. But I don't think that applies to you. You're too aware of what you are, what you've done, what you've survived. So I'll give you a different benediction. Kill well, die hard, and take as many of them with you as possible." The pod sealed shut with a final hiss. Then Guts felt acceleration as the pod was launched toward the planet below. The drop pod screamed through Gallus Prime's atmosphere, ablative plating burning away as it descended. Inside, Guts braced himself, one hand on Dragonslayer's hilt, the other on the pod's restraint harness. He'd fought in sieges before, charged castle walls under arrow fire, led the Band of the Hawk through impossible battles. But he'd never been dropped from orbit onto a planet he'd never seen, to fight demons he'd never encountered. Same mission as always, though. Kill everything. The pod hit ground with catastrophic force, punching through what had once been a street and embedding itself 20 feet deep in rubble. The doors blew outward explosively, and Guts stepped out into hell. The city had been beautiful once. He could see the bones of it, towering spires, grand architecture, infrastructure designed for millions of people. Now it was a ruin. Buildings were twisted into shapes that hurt to look at. The ground itself seemed to pulse with wrongness. And in the distance, he could see the warp rift. Varek had mentioned a massive tear in reality that bled colors that shouldn't exist. The brand on his neck burned. They were coming. Guts drew Dragonslayer and waited. The first cultists emerged from the ruins like rats from shadows. They'd been human once. Now they wore crude armor decorated with symbols that made his eye hurt to perceive. Their weapons were equally crude chainswords, autoguns, blades that glowed with unnatural light. "Blood for the blood god," one of them screamed, raising a chain axe. "Skulls for the skull throne." Guts didn't respond. He just moved, Dragonslayer swept in a wide arc, catching 3 cultists mid-charge. The blade cut through their armor like parchment, bisecting them at the waist. Blood sprayed. Bodies fell. More cultists poured from the ruins. Dozens, then hundreds. Good. More targets. Guts waded into them like a reaper through wheat. Every swing of Dragonslayer killed. The massive blade had weight and momentum that no normal human could wield, but Guts had been swinging it for years. His muscles had been forged in constant warfare. Every motion was efficient, brutal, perfect. A cultist tried to flank him. Guts's prosthetic left arm, the cannon arm, swung around and fired. The explosive round took the cultist's head off at the shoulders. "Heretic!" Another cultist screamed. "The dark gods will." Dragonslayer removed his lower jaw mid-sentence. They kept coming, wave after wave. Some were enhanced by whatever chaos, corruption infected them stronger, faster, more resilient than normal humans. It didn't matter. Guts had fought apostles. These cultists, empowered or not, were still just human. He cut through them systematically. No wasted movement, no mercy, just efficient slaughter. 10 minutes later, 200 cultists lay dead in the streets. Guts stood in a circle of corpses, breathing heavily, Dragonslayer dripping blood. The brand on his neck burned brighter. Something else was coming. They manifested from the corpses themselves, daemons pulling themselves from pools of blood like insects hatching from eggs. Guts recognized them immediately. Not their exact forms, but their nature. They moved like apostles, carried the same wrongness, the same violation of natural law. In his world, they'd been humans who sacrificed everything to become monsters. Here, they seemed to be pure manifestations of something. Raw malevolence given form. The creatures were roughly humanoid but wrong. Skin the color of dried blood, too many joints in their limbs, claws that dripped molten brass, and faces, if they could be called faces, that were all teeth and rage. One of them spoke, voice like grinding metal. "Marked one. The blood god senses your fury. Join us. Become." Guts charged. Dragonslayer caught the daemon mid-sentence, the blade cutting deep into its torso. The creature screamed a sound that bypassed his ears and went straight to his brain and exploded into ash. The brand on his neck flared with pain. It always did when demons died nearby. Good. That meant they could die. The other daemons, 30, 40, he didn't bother counting, swarmed him as one. This was different from fighting cultists. These things were faster, stronger, and didn't have human limitations. They moved with inhuman speed, struck from impossible angles, and their claws could punch through stone. Guts's eye narrowed. The berserker armor responded to his intent, plates shifting slightly to provide better protection. He felt the familiar sensation of the armor's influence, the dulling of pain, the surge of aggression, the whisper that said, "Kill, kill, kill." He'd worn this armor for years, learned to walk the line between using it and being consumed by it. Right now, he needed it. A daemon lunged at his back. Guts twisted, bringing Dragonslayer around in a rising cut that split the creature from groin to skull. Another attacked from his left. The cannon arm fired, blasting the daemon into chunks of burning meat. They surrounded him, trying to overwhelm him with numbers. Guts had fought in surrounded situations 100 times. You didn't panic. You didn't waste energy trying to defend all sides. You attacked constantly, creating space through violence. Dragonslayer became a whirlwind of steel. Every swing killed or maimed. The daemons screeched and howled, their rage matching his own. For every one he killed, 2 more seemed to manifest. But Guts had learned something fighting apostles. Rage made you predictable, and predictable enemies died easy. A daemon charged straight at him, all fury and no thought. Guts sidestepped, letting the creature's momentum carry it past, and brought Dragonslayer down on its spine. Bisection. Another tried to grab him from behind. Guts slammed his head backward, the berserker armor's helmet crushing the daemon's face, then spun and removed its head with a horizontal cut. The battle became a rhythm. Strike, kill, move, strike, kill, move. over and over until the ground was carpeted with Damon corpses that slowly dissolved into nothing. When the last Damon fell, Guts stood alone in the street, breathing hard. His body ached. The berserker armor was drinking his blood to repair damage he hadn't even felt. But he was alive. The brand on his neck had stopped burning. For now, Guts looked toward the distant warp rift. That's where the real fight was. Everything else was just foreplay. He started walking, high above Gallus Prime, in the observation deck of the inquisitorial vessel Unrelenting Truth. Matthias Varric watched through servo skull feeds. The skull-shaped drone hovered invisibly above the battlefield, recording everything. Varric had deployed it the moment Guts's drop pod landed, wanting to see exactly what his new weapon could do. What he was seeing defied explanation. "Explain this," he demanded, gesturing at the hololithic display showing Guts standing alone in a field of dissolving Damon corpses. The senior tech priest, Magos Deltrian, manipulated the display's controls with mechadendrites. "I cannot, Inquisitor. By all logical analysis, what we just observed is impossible. Be specific." The subject Guts wields a weapon with no detectable psychic properties, no blessing from the Emperor, no holy oils or consecrated runes. It is, by all measurements, simply a very large sword made of crude iron. And yet it killed daemons. Yes, which should not be possible. Daemons are manifestations of warp energy. They require psychically attuned weapons to harm permanently. Bolters, flamers, standard ordnance, all are minimally effective against demonic entities. Yet his sword. Deltrian replayed the footage of Dragonslayer cutting through a bloodletter. The daemon dissolved on contact, banished back to the warp as surely as if it had been struck by a Grey Knight's force weapon. His rage, Varric said quietly. Look at his biometric readings. Heart rate elevated but steady. Stress hormones through the roof. But no fear, not a trace of it. Just pure, controlled fury. You believe his emotional state somehow empowers the weapon? I believe he's been killing demons for so long that his hatred has become its own force. The sword drinks that hatred, becomes an extension of it. Varric leaned forward, studying Guts's face on the display. Look at his eye. That's not the look of a soldier following orders. That's the look of a man who lives to kill. Another tech priest interjected. Inquisitor, his armor. We still cannot identify its composition or construction, but I've analyzed its behavior during combat. It drinks his blood. I'm aware. He told us as much, but do you understand what that means? The armor is sustaining him beyond human limits. Every wound he takes, the armor compensates. Broken bones are forced to move. Torn muscles are held together. He should have collapsed from blood loss 5 minutes into that engagement. Instead, he fought for 15 minutes without slowing. Varric nodded slowly. He's already damned. The brand on his neck marks him as a sacrifice to entities similar to our chaos gods. He cannot die easily because he's already been marked for death. He exists in a state of perpetual survival. That is heretical, Inquisitor. Yes, it is. But heresy is my jurisdiction, Magos. And right now, I'm weaponizing it against chaos itself. Varric stood, his augmetic eye tracking Guts as the warrior began walking toward the city's interior. How many cultists between him and the central rift? Estimates suggest 5,000, minimum, perhaps more. And daemons? Unknown. Warp entities are difficult to count, but sensor readings indicate significant demonic presence near the rift. Good. Let's see what one man can do against an army. Meanwhile, on the surface, Guts continued his march through the ruined city. He'd found survivors, a group of civilians hiding in what remained of a hab block basement. Men, women, children, all terrified. All looking at him with desperate hope. Please, one of them begged. The monsters, they're everywhere. Can you save us? Guts looked at them, saw the hope in their eyes. Remembered when he'd had people who looked at him that way. The Band of the Hawk. Before the eclipse. Before everything. I'm not here to save anyone, he said. I'm here to kill. He pulled weapons from dead cultists in the street autoguns, stub pistols, a chainsword, and threw them into the basement. Defend yourselves. Then he left them there. He could hear their protests, their pleas for him to stay. He ignored them. Guts had learned a long time ago that he couldn't save everyone. Hell, he couldn't even save the people he cared about most. Casca was still broken. The band of the Hawk was still dead, and he was still hunting demons that might be unkillable. But he could kill. That he was good at. The city interior loomed ahead, its structures becoming more twisted and wrong with every step. He could feel the warp rift's presence now, a wrongness that pressed against reality like a tumor pressing against healthy tissue. The brand on his neck began burning again. They were coming. More of them. Many more. Guts tightened his grip on Dragonslayer and smiled without humor. Good. The deeper Guts pushed into the city, the worse the corruption became. Buildings weren't just damaged, they were transformed. Stone and metal had been fused with organic matter, creating structures that breathed. Streets pulsed like arteries. And everywhere, there were bodies, or what had once been bodies. Chaos spawn. That's what Varrock had called them. People who'd been exposed to too much warp energy and mutated beyond recognition. Some were bloated, masses of flesh, with too many mouths. Others were stretched and elongated, bones protruding at wrong angles. A few retained enough humanity to beg for death, even as they attacked. Guts gave them what they wanted. A spawn that had once been a woman lurched toward him, her body twisted into a centipede-like form with her human torso still recognizable at the front. She was crying, "Please, kill me, it hurts." Dragonslayer took her head off. Mercy and efficiency in one motion. More spawn emerged from the buildings. These ones were too far gone to speak. They just attacked, driven by instinct and pain. Guts cut through them mechanically. They were dangerous. Some had claws that could rend steel. Others spat acid or breathed fire, but they were predictable. Animals driven by base impulses. He'd killed monsters like this before. During the eclipse, humans had been transformed into demons right before his eyes. Friends had become things that wanted to eat him. This was the same. Different aesthetics, same horror. A spawn with 6 arms and a mouth full of lamprey teeth tried to grapple him. Guts let it grab him, then fired his cannon arm directly into its center mass. The explosion tore it apart from the inside. Another spawn, this one fast, skittering on blade-like legs, came at him from above. Guts caught movement in his peripheral vision, ducked, and brought Dragonslayer up in a rising cut that split the creature lengthwise. They kept coming. Dozens of them, pouring from buildings and alleys like a tide of wrongness. The berserker armor hummed against his skin, eager. It wanted him to give in, to stop thinking and just kill. Let the armor guide his movements, suppress all pain, become pure violence. Not yet. He'd learned to ration the armor's influence, save it for when he really needed it. A spawn the size of a building emerged from the ruins ahead, some poor bastard who'd been transformed into a mountain of flesh and teeth. It roared with a dozen throats. Guts charged it. The creature swiped at him with a limb that had once been an arm. Guts rolled under the strike, came up running, and leaped. Dragonslayer plunged into the spawn's mass, and Guts began climbing, using his sword like an ice pick. The creature thrashed, trying to shake him off. More limbs emerged from its body, grabbing at him. Guts hacked them off as he climbed, working his way toward what might have been the thing's head. When he reached the cluster of human faces fused together at the top, Guts drove Dragonslayer straight through the center. The entire mass convulsed, then collapsed, dissolving into foul-smelling ichor. He hit the ground running, not slowing down. The central rift was close now. He could feel it pulling at reality, trying to drag the material world into whatever hell lay beyond. And around that rift, he could see them. Thousands of cultists, arranged in concentric circles, all chanting in a language that made his teeth ache. At the center, conducting the ritual, were robed figures wreathed in energy that crackled with malevolence. Behind them, partially manifested in the rift itself, was something massive. Something that made every daemon he'd fought so far look insignificant. Guts stopped at a vantage point overlooking the scene. He counted enemies. 5,000 cultists, minimum. Dozens of daemons. And that thing in the rift, he didn't know what it was, but it radiated power that made his brand scream with recognition. This was going to be ugly. High above, Varak watched the servo skull feed with growing concern. He's going to attack, Deltrian observed. 5,000 enemies, and he's going to attack. Of course he is, Varak replied. That's what we deployed him for. But Inquisitor, even enhanced soldiers would require support for an assault of this magnitude. He's one man, one very angry man with a sword that kills daemons and armor that won't let him die. I've seen worse odds. Varak leaned forward. Open Vox channel to his location. Channel open. Guts. This is Varak. Extraction is available. You've provided valuable intelligence. We can. Guts' voice came back, rough and tired but determined. I didn't come here to run. I came here to kill every last one. You'll die, probably, but they'll die first. The Vox channel cut off. On the servo skull feed, Varak watched as Guts checked his equipment. The Berserker armor's plates shifted, tightening. Dragonslayer was held with both hands. The cannon arm was loaded with its last explosive round. Magos, Varak said quietly. Calculate his probability of survival. Deltrian's mechadendrites worked at the cogitator banks. Analyzing. Combat effectiveness, enemy numbers, terrain advantages, demonic presence. The tech priest paused. 0.03% chance of survival. So you're saying there's a chance? Statistically insignificant, Inquisitor. But not zero. Varak smiled grimly. I'll take those odds. He will too. On the display, Guts began his charge toward 5,000 enemies. Alone, Guts studied the ritual site from his vantage point, his single eye taking in every detail. 5,000 cultists weren't just a mob, they were organized. The outer rings were warriors armed with close combat weapons, arranged in defensive formations. The middle rings were ranged combatants he could see autoguns, las guns, even some heavier weapons. The inner circle was the ritual leaders, 50 or so robed figures channeling energy into the warp rift. And the daemons. Dozens of them, scattered throughout the formation like officers commanding troops. Standard siege doctrine said you didn't assault prepared positions head-on. You flanked, you used artillery, you waited for the enemy to make a mistake. Guts had learned tactics from Griffith, back when he'd been the Band of the Hawks raid captain. He knew how warfare worked. He also knew he didn't have artillery, didn't have troops, didn't have time to wait. What he had was a sword, an arm cannon with one shot left, and armor that would keep him alive until his body literally fell apart. Sometimes, overwhelming violence was its own tactic. The brand on his neck burned constantly now. The daemons could feel him. They knew something was wrong, some threat lurking nearby. Good. Let them be nervous. Guts pulled out the last stim injector he'd taken from a dead Tempestus scion. The Imperium's combat drugs were potent, designed to push human physiology beyond natural limits. He'd been saving it. He jammed the needle into his neck and depressed the plunger. The effect was immediate. His heart rate spiked. His muscles flooded with chemical energy. Pain receptors dulled even further than the armor already managed. The world sharpened into crystal clarity, every detail vivid and immediate. The Berserker armor responded to the chemical surge, its influence growing stronger. He could feel it whispering to him, offering to take over completely. Let the armor think, let the armor fight. Just kill and kill and kill until nothing moved. Not yet, Guts muttered. I'm still driving. He stood, Dragonslayer held in both hands, and looked down at the cultist army. They hadn't seen him yet. They were too focused on their ritual, too confident in their numbers. They thought themselves safe. Guts had fought armies before, led 100 men against thousands. Survived when every tactical analysis said he shouldn't. Not because he was better than everyone else, though he was pretty damn good, but because he refused to stop, refused to accept defeat, refused to die until everything that needed killing was dead. 5,000 cultists. Dozens of daemons. One, exhausted, injured, chemically enhanced berserker in cursed armor. Bad odds. He'd had worse. Guts began his descent from the vantage point, moving toward the cultist formation. No stealth, no subtlety, just direct approach. Dragonslayer held ready, every muscle in his body coiled for violence. The first cultist spotted him when he was 50 yards out. The man's eyes widened, and he opened his mouth to shout a warning. Guts was already moving. He covered the distance in seconds, Dragon Slayer swinging in a wide arc that caught the cultist and two others standing near him. Bisection. Blood spray. Bodies hitting the ground. Now the alarm went up. Horns blared. Cultists turned from the ritual, weapons rising. Guts crashed into their lines like a battering ram. The outer ring was warriors, big men and women wearing crude power armor, wielding chainswords and chain axes. They thought themselves fierce, thought themselves strong. Dragon Slayer cut through them like they were wheat. The massive blade had momentum that couldn't be stopped by mere armor. Each swing killed 3, 4, 5 cultists. Guts pivoted constantly, never letting anyone get behind him, using the corpses of the fallen as terrain advantages. A cultist with a chain axe charged him, weapon roaring. Guts caught the axe on Dragon Slayer's flat, turned the blade, and removed the cultist's arms at the shoulders. Before the man could fall, Guts kicked him backward into 2 more cultists, bowling them over. The warriors pressed in, trying to overwhelm him with numbers. Bad tactic. Tight formations just meant his sword hit more of them with each swing. 20 dead. 30. 50. The middle ring ranged combatants opened fire. Autogun rounds pinged off the berserker armor. Last fire scorched his cloak. A heavy stubber managed to punch through armor on his left shoulder, the rounds tearing flesh. Guts barely noticed. The armor and the drugs dulled the pain to background noise. He charged deeper into their formation, closing distance with the ranged fighters. They tried to fall back, maintain range, but Guts was faster. Dragon Slayer swept through them in brutal arcs. A cultist with a flamer tried to bathe him in burning promethium. Guts bowled through the flames the berserker armor could handle heat, and bisected the cultist before the fuel tank on his back exploded. The explosion caught a dozen nearby cultists, immolating them. Guts kept moving forward, toward the center, toward the ritual leaders. The daemons finally responded. 3 of them manifested directly in front of him, bloodletters, the same type he'd fought earlier. They moved with coordinated precision, trying to pin him in place while cultists surrounded him. Bad tactics. You didn't pin down a berserker. You killed him fast or stayed the hell away. Guts met the first daemon's claw strike with Dragon Slayer, the impact sending sparks flying. He twisted the blade, redirecting the daemon's momentum, and brought the sword around in a cut that opened the creature from shoulder to hip, ashen screaming. The second daemon came from his left. Guts's cannon arm swung around and fired point blank. The explosive round took the daemon's head and upper torso clean off. The third daemon hesitated, recognizing the threat. That hesitation cost it. Guts closed distance and drove Dragon Slayer straight through its chest like a spear. The blade punched out the daemon's back, and Guts used the impaled creature as a battering ram, charging forward and crushing cultists under the dying daemon's weight. More daemons manifested. More cultists pressed in. Guts was in the zone now, the state of mind where conscious thought stopped and pure combat instinct took over. Every movement was economy of violence. Every strike killed. He became a whirlwind of steel and fury, Dragon Slayer painting arcs of blood in the air. The cultists were screaming, some in fury, some in fear. It didn't matter which. They all died the same. Guts lost track of his kill count, lost track of how many times he'd been hit. The berserker armor's influence was growing stronger, feeding on the violence, whispering that he should give in completely. Let the armor take over, become the beast. Not yet. Still had work to do. Through the press of bodies, he could see the inner circle. The ritual leaders, 50 robed figures channeling warp energy, their bodies wreathed in corrupt power. Behind them, the rift pulsed, and the massive thing within it was slowly pushing through, trying to fully manifest. That's where he needed to be. Guts bellowed a wordless roar of defiance and fury and charged toward the inner circle. Behind him lay hundreds of dead cultists. Ahead lay thousands more, and at the center, something that might actually be able to kill him. Good. He was just getting started. Guts crashed through the cultist lines like a meteor through parchment. The middle ring of defenders, ranged combatants who'd been providing covering fire, found themselves in close combat with an opponent they weren't trained to fight. Autoguns and lasguns were worse than useless at arm's length. Guts moved through them like death incarnate. A cultist tried to brain him with a rifle stock. Guts caught the weapon with his prosthetic hand, crushed it, and drove his helmeted forehead into the cultist's face. Bones shattered. The cultist dropped. 3 more came at him from different angles, trying to coordinate. Guts pivoted, letting Dragonslayer's momentum carry the blade through all 3 in a single horizontal sweep. Their torsos separated from their legs almost simultaneously. "Blood for the blood god," a cultist champion roared, charging with a power maul, crackling with energy. He was massive, enhanced by chaos, corruption, muscles bulging grotesquely under his armor. Guts sidestepped the overhead strike, let the maul crater the ground where he'd been standing, and brought Dragonslayer down on the champion's shoulder. The blade cut through enhanced muscle and bone, exiting through the opposite hip. The champion fell in 2 pieces, still trying to scream devotions to his god. "Talk less. Die faster," Guts muttered, already moving toward the next target. The cultists were trying to reorganize, forming shield walls and spear formations. Military discipline attempting to compensate for individual weakness. Guts had broken shield walls before. The key was momentum. He charged the formation at full speed. Dragonslayer held horizontal. The blade hit the shields like a battering ram, and the entire line collapsed. Guts trampled over the fallen cultists, crushing them under his armored boots, and drove into the ranks behind them. More Chaos champions emerged, these ones wearing better armor, wielding blessed weapons that glowed with warp energy. 8 of them, forming a kill team specifically to take him down. "Heretic," one of them bellowed. "The dark gods have empowered us to." Guts didn't let him finish. His cannon arm swung up and fired. The explosive round took the speaker's head off, showering his companions with blood and skull fragments. The remaining 7 attacked as one. Coordinated strikes from multiple angles, trying to overwhelm him through teamwork. It almost worked. A blessed Chinax caught him across the ribs, the teeth chewing through armor and into flesh. A power sword stabbed into his thigh, burning muscle. A hammer caught him in the back, cracking vertebrae. The berserker armor screamed in Guts's mind, demanding he let it take over completely. He felt his consciousness slipping toward the edge where man ended and beast began. Not yet. Guts roared and spun, Dragonslayer becoming a hurricane of steel. The first champion lost his arms at the elbows. The second took the blade through his throat. The third tried to parry and found his weapon, and the arms holding it sheared clean through. The remaining 4 hesitated. Fatal mistake. Guts lunged at the nearest one, driving Dragonslayer through his chest and using the impaled body as a shield as another champion's power sword struck. The blade meant for Guts hit his makeshift shield instead. Guts kicked the dying champion off Dragonslayer and into the attacker, bowling both over. Before they could recover, he brought his sword down on them in a 2-handed overhead strike that split both skulls. The last 2 champions broke and ran. Guts let them go. He had bigger targets. The inner circle of ritual leaders was close now, maybe 50 yards through a press of increasingly desperate cultists. Behind them, the warp rift pulsed with malevolent energy, and the thing within it was growing clearer, massive, winged, wrong. The brand on his neck was burning so hot he could smell his own flesh cooking under the armor. "Get out of my way," Guts bellowed, charging forward. The cultists tried. Emperor, they tried. They threw themselves at him in suicidal waves, buying time for their leaders to complete whatever ritual they were conducting. Guts cut through them with mechanical efficiency. 500 dead cultists in his wake. Then 600. 700. His body was failing. Even with the berserker armor's support and the combat drugs flooding his system, there were limits. Bones were cracked, muscles were torn. He'd lost blood, too much blood. The armor was drinking more to compensate, creating a vicious cycle. But Guts had learned long ago how to ignore his body's complaints. Pain was just information, and right now, he was ignoring it. A group of cultists with flamers tried to immolate him. Guts charged straight through the burning promethium, his armor protecting him from the worst of it, and emerged from the flames like a demon himself. Dragon Slayer swept through the flamer troops, and their fuel tanks exploded, creating a wall of fire that separated Guts from the cultists behind him. He used the momentary respite to assess. The inner circle was 30 yards ahead, 50 ritual leaders, all channeling warp energy in perfect synchronization, and protecting them were the daemon's dozens of bloodletters arranged in defensive formation. Between Guts and them, roughly 3,000 cultists who hadn't yet engaged. Bad odds. "I've had worse," Guts said to no one in particular, and charged. High above, Varrock watched the carnage with something approaching awe. 743 confirmed kills, Deltrian reported, his mechadendrites working the cogitator banks frantically. In 17 minutes. Individual combat effectiveness is Inquisitor. This should not be possible. And yet it is. Varrock leaned forward, studying Guts' biometric readings on the display. His vitals are catastrophic. Heart rate at 212 beats per minute. Blood pressure at stroke levels. Multiple fractures. Internal bleeding. He should be dead. The armor, another tech priest interjected. It's sustaining him through. Emperor preserve us. It's literally vampiric. It's drinking his blood and using it as fuel to force his body to continue functioning. How long can he maintain this? Deltrian ran calculations. Unknown. Human physiology should have failed 9 minutes ago. Whatever that armor is, it's keeping him active through means that defy biological analysis. On the display, Guts slammed into the remaining cultist ranks like a wrecking ball. Bodies flew, blood sprayed in arterial arcs. Dragon Slayer rose and fell with mechanical precision. "He's going to reach the ritual leaders," Varrock observed. "When he does, the daemons will engage in force. Can he survive that?" "Probability calculations are meaningless at this point, Inquisitor. He's already exceeded every statistical model. I cannot predict what will happen. Then we watch, and pray to the Emperor that our weapon doesn't break before his job is done." Guts fought through the cultist mob with single-minded fury. Every swing of Dragon Slayer killed. Every step forward was bought with blood, theirs and his. A cultist with a power spear managed to impale him through the abdomen. Guts grabbed the spear shaft, snapped it, and pulled the broken weapon out of his own body. The berserker armor immediately constricted around the wound, stopping the bleeding through sheer pressure. It hurt like hell. He ignored it. Using the broken spear as a secondary weapon, he drove it through the cultist's eye socket, then reclaimed Dragon Slayer and continued forward. The cultists were breaking now. Their formations shattered, their champions dead, their numerical advantage meaningless against an opponent who simply would not stop. Some tried to flee. Guts killed them anyway. No one left alive to maintain the ritual. Then he broke through the final line of cultists and found himself facing the daemons. 50 bloodletters stood between him and the inner circle. Behind them, the ritual leaders continued their chanting, oblivious or uncaring about the slaughter happening around them. And behind the leaders, the warp rift pulsed with increasing intensity. The thing within it was almost through. The bloodletters didn't charge immediately. They stood in perfect formation, hellblades held ready, studying him with ancient malevolence. The largest one, clearly a leader, stepped forward. Its brass collar gleamed with dried blood. When it spoke, the words bypassed Guts' ears and went straight into his skull. "Mortal, you have slain hundreds. The blood god is pleased with your offering." Guts spat blood. "I'm not offering anything to any god. I'm killing demons, that's all. Your denial means nothing. Every death you deal feeds Khorne's power. Every skull you take adds to his throne. You serve him whether you acknowledge it or not. I've heard that before. From the God Hand. From idea of evil. Every demon thinks they own me." Guts raised Dragon Slayer, blood dripping from its edge. "They were wrong too. Then prove your denial. Face us. Die with honor. And Khorne may grant you eternal warfare in his realm." "I don't want eternal anything. I want to kill you. Then move on to the next demon. Then the next. Until I run out of demons or I run out of life. That's it." The bloodletter leader tilted its head, considering. Then it raised its hellblade. "So be it. Bloodletters, kill this mortal. Bathe in his rage. Take his skull for the throne." As one, 50 daemons charged. Guts met them head-on. The collision was catastrophic. Hellblades met Dragonslayer in a shower of sparks and screams. The daemons were fast, inhumanly fast, striking from angles that shouldn't exist. Guts's armor took hit after hit, the brass blades carving furrows through metal and into flesh. But Guts had fought impossible odds before. Had survived the eclipse when 100 demons tried to eat him. Had killed apostles that were faster, stronger, and more durable than he was. This was the same fight. Different aesthetics. Same struggle. He couldn't match their speed. So he didn't try. Instead, he made them come to him. A bloodletter lunged at his throat. Guts turned into the strike, taking the Hellblade on his armored shoulder instead of his neck, and brought Dragonslayer up in a rising cut that split the daemon from groin to skull. Ash and screaming. 2 more attacked simultaneously from left and right. Guts dropped low, letting their strikes pass overhead, and swept Dragonslayer horizontally at knee height. Both daemons' legs separated from their bodies. Before they hit the ground, Guts reversed his grip and drove the sword straight down, impaling both through their torsos. The berserker armor was fully active now. Guts could feel his consciousness receding, the beast within, rising to take control. His vision narrowed. Thoughts became simple. Kill, survive, kill, survive, kill. He let it happen. Just this once, just for this fight. The beast was unleashed. What followed was carnage. Guts moved with speed and ferocity that transcended human limits. The armor guided his movements, compensated for injuries, forced broken limbs to function. He became a whirlwind of steel and fury. Dragonslayer painting arcs of daemon blood in the air. A bloodletter tried to flank him. Guts spun, caught its Hellblade on his prosthetic arm. The metal held and drove Dragonslayer through its chest. Another daemon lunged at his back. The armor's influence let him sense it without seeing it. He twisted, and the daemon impaled itself on his sword. The bloodletter leader watched with what might have been approval. Then it joined the fight. The leader was different, faster, stronger, more skilled. Its Hellblade moved in patterns that seemed to cut through space itself. Where lesser daemons attacked with rage, the leader attacked with precision. It nearly killed Guts 3 times in the first exchange. A thrust at his throat barely parried. A cut at his legs jumped over. A follow-up strike at his torso while airborne caught on Dragonslayer's flat, but the force sent Guts flying backward. He hit the ground hard, rolled, came up bleeding from a dozen new wounds. The bloodletter leader pointed its Hellblade at him. Impressive. You fight well for a mortal, but you bleed. You tire. We do not. Eventually, you will fall. Guts struggled to his feet. The beast was receding. He'd pushed the berserker armor's influence as far as he dared, without losing himself completely. His body screamed protests. Bones ground against each other. Muscles threatened to tear. The combat drugs were wearing off, and the crash was coming. Eventually isn't now, Guts growled. And eventually might never come, he charged. The bloodletter leader met his charge, and they traded strikes at speeds that blurred. Hellblade against Dragonslayer, brass against iron, daemon against human. Guts was slower, weaker, more injured, but he had something the daemon didn't. Experience fighting opponents who outclassed him. Every fight with an apostle had taught him that you didn't beat superior enemies through strength. You beat them through stubbornness, through refusing to quit, through taking punishment that should kill you and keeping going anyway. The bloodletter opened a massive wound across his chest. Guts ignored it and countered with a strike that took the daemon's left arm off at the elbow. The daemon drove its Hellblade through Guts's thigh, pinning him in place. Guts grabbed the daemon's wrist, held it there, and brought Dragonslayer down on the daemon's skull. The blade split the bloodletter leader's head like a melon. The daemon dissolved into ash with a final scream of rage and defiance. Khorne will remember your name. Then it was gone. The remaining bloodletters, 30 of them, maybe less, faltered. Their leader was dead. The mortal still stood. Guts pulled the Hellblade out of his thigh with a grunt of pain, tossed it aside, and raised Dragonslayer. Next, they came at him in a wave. No coordination, just rage. Guts met them with equal rage. The fight lasted another 5 minutes. When it ended, Guts stood alone in a circle of dissolving demon corpses. The last bloodletter turned to ash under Dragonslayer's edge, its death scream echoing across the battlefield. Silence fell. Guts looked around. The cultist army was routed. Maybe 1,000 had fled into the ruins. The rest were corpses. The daemon defenders were ash. Between him and the ritual leaders, there was nothing. He started walking. Behind him, 800 cultists and 80 daemons lay dead. Ahead, 50 ritual leaders continued their chanting, still oblivious. And in the warp rift, the thing within began to emerge. Guts made it 10 steps before his legs gave out. He crashed to his knees, Dragonslayer's point digging into the ground as he used it to keep from falling face first. Every injury he'd ignored during the fight suddenly made itself known. The berserker armor was still active, still forcing his body to function, but there were limits even to its dark miracle. Blood poured from dozens of wounds. Major ones, the impalement through his abdomen, the slash across his chest, the hellblade wound in his thigh. Minor ones, countless cuts, stabs, burns. The armor had sealed what it could, but there was too much damage. His vision blurred. The world tilted. The brand on his neck burned with such intensity that he could barely think. "Get up," he told himself. "Get up. You're not done." His body didn't respond. The chemical high from the combat drugs had crashed, leaving him with the bill for pushing human physiology beyond its limits. His heart was struggling. Organs were failing. The berserker armor was drinking his blood faster than his body could produce it. He was dying. Not yet. Guts forced out through gritted teeth. Not until they're all dead. The armor responded to his will. Plates shifted, tightened. It forced his broken bones to bear weight, forced his torn muscles to contract, forced his failing heart to keep beating through sheer mechanical pressure on his chest. Guts screamed as he stood. The pain was beyond description. The armor was literally holding him together like puppet strings on a corpse. But he stood. Through his blurred vision, he could see the ritual leaders. 50 robed figures, still chanting. And beyond them, the warp rift was finally birthing its occupant into reality. Wings first. Massive, leathery wings that spread 30 feet across. Then the body, 20 feet of corded muscle and brass armor fused directly to flesh. 4 arms, each ending in claws that could tear through tank armor. And the head a horned, fanged nightmare that radiated malevolence so intense that reality itself seemed to flinch away from it. A greater daemon, bloodthirster, avatar of Khorne himself. It looked down at the battlefield, at the thousands of corpses, at the single human warrior standing alone, and it smiled. Finally, a worthy offering. The voice was like thunder and grinding stone and screaming metal all at once. It bypassed Guts' ears and resonated directly in his bones. "Mortal, you have caught the blood god's attention, slain thousands in his name, killed daemon champions, bathed in oceans of blood. Khorne is pleased." Guts spat blood. "Don't care. Join us. Become a champion of Khorne. Eternal warfare, eternal strength, eternal purpose. All you must do is accept. I don't. Join. I don't. Follow." Guts forced himself to take a step forward. Then another. "I kill." The bloodthirster tilted its massive head, considering. Then it laughed a sound like bones breaking. "So be it. Die with honor then. Your skull will make a fine addition to the throne." It raised one massive claw and pointed at Guts. The 50 ritual leaders stopped chanting and turned as one to face him. Their eyes glowed with warp energy. Their flesh was already mutating, bodies warping into new forms. "Great," Guts muttered. "More demons." The ritual leaders attacked. High above, Varek made a decision. Deploy ground forces. Now, Deltrian's mechadendrites froze. "Inquisitor?" "Our orders were to observe only." "Orders change. That man has done what an entire Space Marine company would struggle to accomplish. I will not let him die alone." Varek activated the Vox network. "Tempestus Scion Squad Primus, you are authorized for immediate hot drop deployment. Target coordinates transmitted. Your mission. Provide support for the asset on the ground. Acknowledged, Inquisitor, came the response. Dropping in 30 seconds. On the servo skull feed, Varric watched Guts fighting 50 mutating ritual leaders. The man was moving on pure spite at this point, every movement labored, every strike taking visible effort. But he was still fighting. Magos. How is he still alive? He isn't. Not by any medical definition. His heart has stopped twice in the last minute. The armor restarted it both times through mechanical compression. His blood pressure is non-existent. Multiple organs have failed. By all rights, he should be a corpse. But he's still fighting. The armor will not let him stop. It's operating his body like a puppet, using his skeletal structure as framework and his remaining muscle tissue as actuators. He's essentially a walking corpse at this point. Can he survive? If we extract him immediately and provide extensive medical care, perhaps. But the damage is catastrophic. He'll never fully recover. Varric watched Guts decapitate a mutated ritual leader with a strike that took visible effort. He doesn't need to recover. He needs to finish the job. Then we'll worry about keeping him alive. The sky above the battlefield suddenly lit up with drop pods, dozens of them, streaking down like meteors. They impacted around the ritual site, and from them emerged Tempestus Scions, the Imperium's elite shock troops. 200 soldiers in carapace armor, armed with hotshot lasguns, plasma guns, and melta weapons. They assessed the battlefield in seconds, thousands of dead cultists, ash piles where daemons had been, and one blood-soaked warrior fighting alone against 50 enemies while a greater daemon watched. The Scion commander, a grizzled veteran named Sergeant Kellern, voxed his troops. That's our asset. Form defensive perimeter. Kill anything that gets close to him, and somebody get a medikey over there, he's going to need it. The Scions opened fire. Hotshot lasfire cut through the mutating ritual leaders with surgical precision. Plasma rounds exploded against corrupted flesh. The ritual leaders, caught between Guts and the Imperial forces, didn't stand a chance. Guts barely registered the support. He was too far gone, operating on autopilot, the berserker armor making decisions his conscious mind no longer could. But somewhere in the back of his fading consciousness, he felt gratitude. The last ritual leader fell, its skull split by Dragonslayer. Guts stood in a field of mutated corpses, swaying. The Scions formed a defensive line between him and the warp rift. Medics rushed forward with trauma equipment. Sergeant Kellern approached carefully, weapon ready despite recognizing Guts as an ally. One look at the man's injuries made the veteran soldier grimace. Emperor's mercy, Kellern breathed. How are you still standing? Guts turned his head slowly to look at the sergeant. Habit. Then the bloodthirster moved. The greater daemon stepped fully through the warp rift, its massive form casting a shadow that seemed to darken reality itself. Where its hooves touched ground, the earth cracked and bled. Where its breath touched air, the atmosphere screamed. It looked at the Tempestus Scions with something approaching amusement. Little soldiers, you come to defend the warrior? Admirable. Futile, but admirable. Sergeant Kellern voxed his troops. All units, concentrate fire on the greater daemon. Plasma and Melta aim for center mass. Hot shots suppressing fire. Make every shot count. 200 Scions opened fire simultaneously. Plasma bolts, miniature suns slammed into the bloodthirster's chest. Melta beams, hot enough to vaporize tank armor, scorched its flesh. Hot shot lasfire, more powerful than standard las weapons, peppered its form. The bloodthirster barely noticed. It took a step forward. The ground shook. Another step. The air itself seemed to compress under the weight of its presence. Then it opened its mouth and roared. The sound was psychic as much as physical. It hit the Scions like a physical force, stunning them. Several fell to their knees, bleeding from ears and noses. A few collapsed entirely, their minds unable to process the daemon's presence. Sergeant Kellern managed to stay standing through sheer force of will. Hold the line, do not break. The bloodthirster charged. What followed was slaughter. A greater daemon against conventional troops, even elite troops, was an unfair fight. The bloodthirster moved with impossible speed for something its size, crossing the distance in heartbeats. Its claws swept through Scion ranks like scythes through wheat. Kellern watched in horror as 20 of his men died in the first seconds. Torn apart, bisected, crushed under hooves that could crack ferrocrete. Fall back, fighting retreat, get the asset out of here. But there was nowhere to fall back to. The daemon was between them and any escape route, and it wasn't focused on killing them efficiently, it was playing with them, taking its time, savoring the slaughter. Guts watched the massacre through his fading vision. The scions were dying, trying to save him. Failing. He'd seen this before. The band of the Hawk dying around him during the eclipse. Unable to save them. Unable to do anything but watch. Not again. The berserker armor sensed his fury. It responded, flooding his system with one final surge of whatever dark energy sustained it. His heart, which had stopped again, restarted. His muscles, which had failed completely, contracted. His grip on Dragonslayer tightened. Guts took a step toward the bloodthirster, then another. Sergeant Kellern saw him moving. "No, you can barely stand. You can't. Watch me." Guts growled and charged. He wasn't fast, wasn't graceful. His body was barely functioning, but he still had Dragonslayer, still had the armor, still had rage. The bloodthirster sensed him coming and turned, abandoning the scions. It raised one massive claw to swat him aside. Guts ducked under the strike, his enhanced instincts still functional even if his body wasn't. He drove Dragonslayer up into the daemon's armpit, the blade punching through brass armor and into flesh beneath. The bloodthirster roared, more in surprise than pain, and backhanded Guts. The impact sent him flying 50 feet. He hit the ground, rolled, struggled to stand. The daemon looked at the wound in its armpit, then at Guts. When it spoke, its voice carried what might have been respect. You are worthy. Not the soldiers. You don't care what you think. Guts forced out. Just die already. I cannot die. Not here. Not by your hand. But I can grant you worthy death. Face me, warrior. Let us see whose fury burns brighter. The bloodthirster advanced toward Guts, ignoring the scions entirely now. Its focus was absolute. This human had wounded it. This human would receive its full attention. Sergeant Kellern made a decision. All units, pull back to extraction coordinates. The asset is engaging the daemon. We cannot help him. Move. The surviving scions, 170 remaining, retreated, dragging wounded comrades. They didn't want to leave Guts alone, but they recognized tactical reality. They'd just die if they stayed. Guts and the bloodthirster faced each other across blood-soaked ground. The daemon was 20 feet tall, four-armed, armored in brass and fury. Guts was barely 6 feet, wounded beyond measure, held together by cursed armor and spite. "Let's finish this," Guts said, raising Dragonslayer one last time. The bloodthirster charged. The collision was apocalyptic. The bloodthirster's first strike, a overhead chop with one massive claw, came down where Guts had been standing. He rolled aside, the impact cratering the ground and sending shockwaves that knocked him off his feet anyway. Before he could stand, another claw swept horizontally at chest height. Guts went flat, the strike passing inches overhead. He came up swinging, Dragonslayer cutting a line across the demon's leg. The wound was shallow. The daemon barely noticed. It responded with a kick that caught Guts in the ribs. The armor crumpled inward, bones shattered, internal organs ruptured. Guts flew backward, hit a ruined wall, went through it, and came to rest in rubble. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't think through the pain. The berserker armor forced him to stand anyway. Get up, get up. Not done. Not done yet. Guts emerged from the rubble, coughing blood. His vision was tunneling, his hearing was muffled, but he could still see the daemon, still had Dragonslayer, still have work to do. The bloodthirster waited, letting him approach. It could have finished him while he was down, chose not to. This was sport for the daemon. Entertainment. Enjoying yourself? Guts rasped, immensely. It has been centuries since a mortal gave me such challenge. I will savor your death. Not dead yet. Guts attacked again. The berserker armor was controlling his body completely. Now he was just a passenger, watching his own movements like they belonged to someone else. The armor knew how to fight, knew his techniques, could operate his body even as consciousness faded. Dragonslayer struck the daemon's chest, scored a wound, shallow but real. The bloodthirster's expression changed. This mortal was still wounding it, still fighting. This deserved respect. You refuse to fall. Good. Khorne despises weakness. You have none. It attacked with all 4 arms simultaneously. Claws came from every angle. Guts couldn't dodge them all. No one could. He took hits that would have killed him instantly if the armor hadn't absorbed most of the impact. His left arm broke. His right shoulder dislocated. His spine cracked in 3 places. The armor forced everything to keep working. Guts countered with a desperate upward strike that caught the daemon under its jaw. Dragonslayer punched through, the tip exiting through the top of the daemon's skull. The bloodthirster staggered backward, claws going to the blade, impaling its head. It grabbed Dragonslayer and pulled the massive sword sliding out of its skull with a wet sound. The wound was already healing, closing, regenerating from warp energy. Impressive. You wounded me twice. More than most champions manage. The daemon tossed Dragonslayer aside like it weighed nothing. The sword landed 50 feet away. Guts stood empty-handed, broken, bleeding from everywhere. The bloodthirster raised all 4 claws, preparing to tear him apart. Then orbital lances struck from above. High above, Varric had given the order. Fire. 3 lance batteries, massive energy weapons mounted on the unrelenting truth, fired simultaneously. Coherent beams of concentrated energy, powerful enough to crack continents, slammed down from orbit. The bloodthirster looked up just as the first lance hit. The explosion was visible from space. The daemon was engulfed in energy that would have vaporized a battle tank. The ground melted, the air ignited. When the light faded, the bloodthirster still stood, burned, wounded, but standing. It looked up at the orbiting ship and roared defiance. Your weapons mean nothing. I am eternal. I am... The second lance strike hit. Then the third. The bloodthirster was driven to its knees by the bombardment. Its brass armor was melting. Its flesh was charring. It was hurt, truly hurt, but it was regenerating. The warp rift behind it was feeding it energy, healing the damage as fast as it was inflicted. Guts struggled to his feet and stumbled toward where Dragonslayer had fallen. Every step was agony. Every breath was blood. But he reached the sword, wrapped his hand around its hilt, and raised it. The bombardment stopped. Varric couldn't risk hitting Guts. The bloodthirster rose, regenerated flesh already replacing burned tissue. That hurt. Guts faced the daemon, knowing he had one chance, one opportunity before his body gave out completely. He looked at the warp rift behind the bloodthirster, pulsing with energy, feeding the daemon, keeping it anchored to reality. Close the rift. Cut off its power. Then maybe it can be killed. But to close the rift, he'd need to kill whatever was maintaining it. The ritual leaders were dead, which meant the daemon itself was the anchor now. Circular problem. Can't kill daemon while rift is open. Can't close rift while daemon lives. Unless... Guts's eye widened slightly as an idea formed. Terrible idea. Suicidal idea. But the only idea he had. If I can't kill it, I can push it back through, force it into the rift, then collapse the rift while it's transitioning. The berserker armor sensed his intent. It flooded his system with one final surge of dark energy, the last reserves of whatever sustained it. This was it. Last stand. Do or die. Probably die. Guts charged the greater daemon one final time. The bloodthirster met his charge, claws raised to end him. This was going to hurt. The bloodthirster's claw came down like a falling building. Guts threw himself sideways, the impact cratering the ground where he'd been standing. Shockwaves knocked him sprawling. Before he could recover, another strike came, this one, a horizontal sweep of all 4 arms simultaneously. He couldn't dodge, couldn't block, could only take it. The impact was catastrophic. Guts felt ribs shatter, felt his spine compress, felt internal organs rupture. He flew backward, tumbling through the air, and crashed into rubble 50 yards away. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't even think through the pain. The berserker armor tried to force him up, tried to make his broken body function. But there were limits even to its dark miracle. Too much damage, too much blood loss, too much trauma. Guts' vision went black. "Get him out of there," Sergeant Kellern's voice cut through the battlefield chaos. 3 scions broke formation and sprinted toward where Guts had landed, laying down suppressing fire toward the bloodthirster as they ran. The daemon could have killed them easily, chose not to. Its attention was fixed on the ruins where Guts had fallen, waiting to see if the warrior would rise again. The scions reached Guts and found him unconscious, armor cracked, blood pooling beneath him. "He's still breathing," one of them reported. "Barely. Then move him. Back to extraction point. Now." They grabbed Guts under his arms and dragged him backward, his boots leaving twin trails in the blood-soaked dirt. The bloodthirster watched them retreat but didn't pursue. It was confident. The mortal was broken. The fight was over. The daemon turned its attention back to the warp rift, beginning the process of fully anchoring itself to reality. Guts regained consciousness in a ruined building 100 yards from the ritual site. His first sensation was pain absolute, all-consuming pain. His second sensation was frustration. Still alive. Damn it. A scion medicae was working on him frantically, injecting him with stims, sealing wounds with synth skin, administering emergency transfusions. The soldier looked up when Guts' eye opened. "Stay down. You're in critical condition. Multiple organ failures, catastrophic blood loss, skeletal damage." Guts grabbed the medicae's arm. "The daemon? Still there. It's stabilizing its manifestation. We called for orbital bombardment, but I know. Saw it." Guts coughed blood. "Didn't work. It's regenerating. As long as the rift is open, it can't be killed." Sergeant Kellern approached, his armor scorched and dented. "Then we extract and call for exterminatus. Virus bomb the entire planet. It's the only way." "No." Guts tried to sit up. His body screamed protest. The berserker armor forced him upright anyway. "The rift. We'll survive that. Open gateway to the warp. You can't nuke it closed." "Then what do you suggest?" Guts looked toward the ritual site. Through gaps in the ruined walls, he could see the bloodthirster standing at the rift's edge, conducting some kind of ritual. Behind it, the tear in reality pulsed with increasing stability. It's trying to make the rift permanent. Once it succeeds, this world becomes a daemon world. Gateway between real space and the warp. "The rift needs anchors," Guts said slowly, his tactical mind working despite his injuries. "Physical anchors. The ritual leaders were maintaining it. Now, they're dead. So the daemon itself is the anchor. So we can't close the rift without killing the daemon, and we can't kill the daemon while the rift is open. Circular problem. Not circular. Sequential." Guts struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on Dragonslayer. "The daemon is physical now. Manifested. That means it's vulnerable. Not much, but some. If I can disrupt its anchoring ritual, force it back toward the rift, maybe collapse it, while the daemon is transitioning between dimensions." Kellern stared at him. "That's suicide. You can barely stand. One more hit from that thing will kill you. Then I'd better not get hit." Guts took a step toward the door. His leg nearly gave out. The armor forced it to bear weight. "How many cultists left?" "Estimates suggest 1,000 fled into the ruins. Could be more. And between here and the daemon? Unknown. But they're regrouping near the rift, trying to protect their god." Guts nodded slowly. "Then that's where I'm going. Kill the cultists. Disrupt the daemon's ritual. Close the rift." "With what?" "You're dying." "I've been dying. For years. Haven't managed it yet." Guts looked at the sergeant. "Your men did good. Saved my life. Now get them. Out of here. This is my fight. Inquisitor Varak ordered us to support you. Then support me. By surviving. Tell Varak I finished the job." Kellern was quiet for a moment. Then he saluted a crisp Imperial Aquila. Emperor be with you, warrior. Don't need gods. Just need targets. Guts walked out of the building, leaving the scions behind. Every step was agony. Every breath was blood. But he kept moving. The berserker armor whispered to him constantly now. Give in. Let me take over. Let me pilot this corpse to victory. You're too weak, too broken. Let me be strong for you. Not yet, Guts muttered. Still. My body. Still. My fight. He could see the ritual site ahead. The bloodthirster stood at the rift's center, arms raised, conducting whatever dark ceremony would make its presence permanent. And around it, cultists were indeed regrouping, hundreds of them, forming defensive lines. One man against 1,000 cultists and a greater daemon. He'd had worse odds. No, I haven't, Guts admitted to himself. This is probably the worst. He tightened his grip on Dragonslayer and continued forward. Behind him, Sergeant Kellern watched through magnoculars. He's actually going back in, alone, against all of that. Is he insane? Another scion asked. Yes, Kellern replied, but I think that's what makes him perfect for this. Guts approached the ritual site from the west, using ruined buildings for cover. The cultists hadn't spotted him yet. They were too focused on defending their daemon god. He studied the layout. The bloodthirster was at the rift's center, conducting its ritual. Around it, cultists formed 3 defensive rings, inner, middle, outer, maybe 800 total. Not the organized army from before, but desperate survivors trying to protect their god. Can't fight through all of them. Not in my condition. Need a different approach. His eye tracked the rift itself. It was pulsing with regular rhythm now, like a heartbeat. Each pulse, it grew slightly more stable. The demon's ritual was working. How long until it's permanent? He watched the daemon's movements, the way it channeled energy. The warp rift responded to its actions, growing clearer with each gesture. Maybe an hour. Less. The brand on his neck burned constantly now, responding to the daemon's presence. But Guts had learned to use that burn as a compass. It pointed toward demons, told him where they were, how powerful, how close. Right now, it was screaming at him that death incarnate was 100 yards away. I know. Shut up. Guts circled around to the north side of the ritual site, moving slowly to avoid detection. His body protested every movement, but he ignored it. Pain was just information, and he was very good at ignoring information. From this angle, he could see something useful. The cultists weren't evenly distributed. The northern defensive ring was thinner, maybe 50 cultists, compared to hundreds on the other sides. Weak point. They're expecting attack from where the scions retreated. Not from here. He could break through 50 cultists. Even in his condition. The real question was what happened after that. Once he was in the inner circle, exposed, with nowhere to hide. The daemon would kill him, unless he killed it first. Can't kill it. Already tried. It regenerates too fast. So if he couldn't kill it, what could he do? Guts looked at the rift again. The daemon was anchoring itself to real space through that tear. As long as the rift existed, the daemon could regenerate. But if the rift closed while the daemon was partway through, it gets cut off, banished back to the warp. The problem was closing the rift. The ritual leaders had been maintaining it through their ceremony. With them dead, the daemon itself was the anchor, which meant kill the daemon to close the rift. But can't kill the daemon while rift is open. Circular logic. Unless it wasn't circular. Unless there was a moment, a single moment, when the daemon was vulnerable. Guts remembered his fight with the bloodthirster. How it had staggered when Dragonslayer impaled its skull. How it had recoiled from the orbital bombardment. It could be hurt. It just regenerated too fast to be killed. But regeneration required energy, and that energy came from the rift. So if I can force it away from the rift, even for a moment, cut it off from its power source. The idea was insane. But Guts had built a career on insane ideas. He would charge through the northern defense line, slaughter his way to the inner circle, then attack the daemon not to kill it, but to drive it back, away from the rift. And in that moment, when it was separated from its power source, when it couldn't regenerate fast enough, he'd close the rift, How exactly he'd close a tear in reality, Guts had no idea. But he'd figure it out when he got there. He always did. This is stupid. This is suicide. This won't work. He tightened his grip on Dragonslayer. Doesn't matter. It's all I've got. Guts pulled out the last item he'd salvaged from dead scions, a frag grenade. He looked at it, then at the northern defensive line. One chance. Make it count. He threw the grenade. The grenade detonated in the middle of the northern defensive line. 50 cultists scattered, diving for cover. In that moment of chaos, Guts charged. He hit the disrupted line like a meteor. Dragonslayer swept through confused cultists before they could reform. 3 dead. 5. 10. They tried to rally, to coordinate, but Guts didn't give them time. The Berserker armor was fully active now, piloting his broken body with mechanical precision. His conscious mind was barely involved, just a passenger watching his own hands kill. A cultist with a chain axe lunged at him. The armor made Guts's body sidestep, made his hands swing Dragonslayer in a counter that took the cultist's head off. Another attacked from behind. The armor sensed it somehow, made Guts spin and bisect the attacker without looking. He was through the outer ring in 30 seconds. 50 cultists dead or dying. The middle ring responded, forming up to block him. These were better equipped, some wearing power armor, wielding plasma weapons. They opened fire. Plasma bolts seared past him. One caught his left shoulder, burning through armor and into flesh. Another hit his thigh, melting muscle. The pain was absolute. The Berserker armor forced him to keep moving. Guts crashed into the middle ring formation like a wrecking ball. Dragonslayer swept in wide arcs, the blade cutting through power armor like it was paper. He was beyond technique now, beyond strategy. Just pure violence given form. A cultist champion bigger than the others, wearing full plate that glowed with chaos corruption, stepped forward to meet him. Heretic, the blood god will. Guts drove Dragonslayer through his chest before he could finish, used the impaled body as a shield as other cultists fired. When the corpse was too riddled with holes to be useful, he kicked it off his blade and continued forward. The middle ring broke. The cultists were fleeing now, their courage failing. But Guts didn't let them run. He cut them down from behind. Dragonslayer rising and falling with mechanical precision. 200 cultists dead. The inner ring finally responded. These were the fanatics, the true believers who'd stayed with their god even after the army routed. They didn't flee, didn't hesitate, just charged him en masse. 300 cultists, all willing to die. Guts met them in the center. What followed was butchery. Not combat, not battle, just slaughter. The Berserker armor had full control now. Guts's consciousness was a distant thing, watching his body move with speed and ferocity that transcended humanity. Every swing killed. Every step forward was bought with cultist blood. He took hits that should have ended him. A power sword through his back, a chainsword across his throat, a plasma bolt to the chest. The armor sealed what it could, forced broken bones to move, kept the corpse fighting. Because that's what Guts was now. A corpse, animated by cursed armor and spite. But he was killing. That's all that mattered. The inner ring lasted 5 minutes. When it was over, 300 cultists lay dead, and Guts stood alone before the warp rift. The bloodthirster had stopped its ritual. It was looking at Guts now, and for the first time, the daemon seemed genuinely surprised. You still live. You still fight. Guts raised Dragonslayer with trembling arms. Couldn't speak anymore. His throat was too damaged. Just pointed the blade at the daemon. The message was clear. Come on. The bloodthirster tilted its head, studying him. Then it smiled. You are worthy. More than worthy. Khorne himself watches this battle. He offers you one final chance. Join us. Become a daemon prince. Eternal strength. Eternal warfare. Eternal purpose. Guts's response was to spit blood at the daemon's feet. The bloodthirster's smile widened. So be it. Die as a champion then. Your skull will be honored. It stepped away from the rift, moving toward Guts with predatory intent. Yes. Away from the rift. Away from your power source. Guts had one chance. One moment when the daemon was vulnerable. He just had to survive long enough to exploit it. The daemon attacked with all 4 arms simultaneously. Guts didn't try to block, didn't try to dodge. He threw himself forward, inside the daemon's reach, and drove Dragonslayer up into its abdomen. The blade punched through brass armor and into whatever passed for the daemon's guts. Guts twisted the sword, maximizing damage, and the bloodthirster screamed. Then one massive claw closed around Guts's torso and lifted him off the ground. The pressure was immense. The berserker armor crumpled inward. Ribs that had already been broken were now pulverized. His spine compressed, organs ruptured. The daemon brought Guts close to its face, its breath reeking of blood and brass. "You hurt me. Good. Now die with honor." It began to squeeze. Guts couldn't breathe, couldn't move. His vision was going black. The berserker armor was trying to protect him, but there were limits to what even cursed artifact could withstand. This is it. This is how it ends. Through his fading vision, Guts could see past the daemon, could see the warp rift pulsing behind it, still open, still feeding the daemon energy. Not close enough. It's still too close to the rift. It's still regenerating. He needed to push it back further, needed to separate it from its power source completely. But how? He had no strength left, no weapons. His cannon arm was crushed. Dragonslayer was still embedded in the daemon's abdomen, out of reach. Nothing left, except his spite. Guts grabbed the daemon's thumb, the one crushing his chest, and bit down. His teeth, reinforced by the armor's influence, punched through brass and into daemon flesh. He bit down harder, tasting blood that burned like acid, and didn't let go. The bloodthirster roared in surprise, more than pain, and threw Guts away. He flew through the air, tumbling, and hit the ground 30 feet from the rift. Closer. Guts struggled to his feet, or tried to. His legs wouldn't respond anymore. The berserker armor forced them to move, but the damage was too catastrophic. He managed to get to his knees, blood pouring from his mouth. The bloodthirster advanced, limping slightly from the wound in its abdomen. It was regenerating, but slower now. Further from the rift meant less energy. Good. It's working. The daemon reached him and raised all 4 claws for a final strike. Guts had one last trick. He'd taken something from a dead scion hours ago, saved it. Hadn't used it because he'd been saving it for exactly this moment. A melt-a-bomb, anti-tank weapon, designed to vaporize armored vehicles. Strapped to his back, hidden under his cloak. Guts activated it. The bloodthirster's claws came down. Guts lunged forward, grabbed the daemon's leg with both arms, and held on. "Got you," he whispered through blood-filled mouth. The melt-a-bomb detonated. The explosion was visible from orbit. Thermal energy hot enough to vaporize adamantium erupted outward. The bloodthirster was engulfed in a sphere of incandescent fury. Guts, at ground zero, was incinerated, or should have been. The berserker armor did something impossible. It channeled the explosion's energy around Guts rather than through him, using its own substance as a heat sink. The armor melted, fused to his flesh, became part of him. But he survived. The bloodthirster didn't fare as well. The melt-a-bomb had detonated directly against its torso. Brass armor vaporized. Flesh boiled away. The daemon's regeneration kicked in immediately, pulling energy from the rift to repair the catastrophic damage. But Guts had accomplished his goal. The explosion had thrown the daemon backward away from the rift. 10 feet, 20, 30. Too far to regenerate effectively. The bloodthirster realized the trap too late. It tried to return to the rift, to reconnect with its power source, but its legs were too damaged. It collapsed, crawling toward the tear in reality. "No, I will not be denied. I am eternal. I am..." Guts stood. Somehow, impossibly, he stood. The berserker armor was fused to his body now, indistinguishable from his flesh. His consciousness was a flickering thing, barely holding on. But he could still move, still had purpose. Dragonslayer was still embedded in the daemon's abdomen. Guts walked to it, grabbed the hilt, and pulled it free. The daemon looked up at him with something approaching fear. "You cannot. Khorne will." "Shut up," Guts raised Dragonslayer overhead and brought it down on the daemon's head with every remaining ounce of strength. The blade split the bloodthirster's skull, punched through into its brain. The daemon screamed a sound that made reality itself crack, and its form began to dissolve. But it wasn't dead. It was being pulled back to the warp, back to Khorne's realm where it would regenerate and return, unless the rift closed first. Guts looked at the tear in reality, pulsing, weakening now that its anchor was destroyed, but not closing fast enough. Need to force it closed. But how? The brand on his neck gave him an answer. The brand was a mark of sacrifice, a connection to higher dimensions, a link between real space and whatever hell the God Hand inhabited. And if it could link to one hell, maybe it could affect another. Guts walked toward the rift, Dragonslayer held ready. High above, Inquisitor Varric watched the servo skull feed with absolute focus. "What is he doing?" Deltrian asked. On the display, Guts was walking toward the warp rift. The bloodthirster's dissolving form was being pulled through the tear, but the rift itself showed no signs of closing. He's going to try to close it manually, Varric realized. That's impossible. The energy's involved. He doesn't care about impossible. Look at him. He should be dead 10 times over. Instead, he's still walking. On the display, Guts reached the rift's edge. The wrongness emanating from it was visible even through the servo skull's sensors. Reality distorted, colors bled, space itself twisted. Guts raised Dragonslayer and plunged it into the rift's edge. The moment the blade touched the tear in reality, Guts's world became pain. The warp energy in the rift connected with the brand on his neck, two different hells recognizing each other. Power flooded through him. Not his power, not the armor's power. Something else entirely. The brand flared with light so intense it was visible from orbit. Guts screamed, but he didn't let go of Dragonslayer. Instead, he used the sword as an anchor, pulling himself closer to the rift. The warp energy was trying to drag him through, to pull him into whatever nightmare realm lay beyond. He resisted. The berserker armor, fused to his flesh now, responded to his will. It began to change, to adapt. Plates that had been steel became something else, something that existed partially in the warp and partially in real space, something that could touch the rift without being consumed. Guts grabbed the edges of the tear with his hands and began to pull it closed. The warp screamed. Reality screamed. Guts screamed with them. It was like trying to pull a wound shut with bare hands while the wound fought back. The rift resisted, trying to stay open, feeding on the surrounding corruption. But Guts was stronger. Or more precisely, his will was stronger. He'd spent years fighting demons, years resisting corruption, years refusing to break no matter what hell threw at him. The God Hand had tried to break him during the eclipse, failed. The idea of evil had tried to consume him, failed. And this rift, this tear in reality would fail too. Inch by inch, he pulled it closed. The bloodthirster, halfway through the closing rift, realized what was happening. "No, you cannot. I will return. I will." The rift snapped shut. The daemon was cut in half. Its upper body dissolved into ash on the real space side. Its lower body was trapped in the warp. The resulting psychic shockwave rippled across the planet, and every remaining cultist screamed and collapsed as their connection to chaos was severed. Guts fell to his knees, hands smoking where they'd touched the rift. The brand on his neck was still glowing, still burning, but the rift was gone, sealed. Reality had healed itself. The planet was purged. Guts looked at his hands. The flesh was burned away, exposing the berserker armor beneath. The armor had fused so completely with his body that he couldn't tell where he ended and it began anymore. What am I now? He tried to stand. Failed. Tried again. Failed again. His body had finally given out. The berserker armor could force a corpse to fight, but even it had limits. Guts collapsed face first into blood-soaked ground. His last thought before consciousness faded. Did I finish it? Then darkness. Guts woke to white light and the smell of antiseptic. He tried to move. Couldn't. His body was encased in something medical restraints, maybe. Or the berserker armor had locked up completely. You're awake. Interesting. Inquisitor Varek's voice came from somewhere to his right. I wasn't certain you would wake at all. Gnome. Guts managed to turn his head slightly. He was in a medical bay aboard Varek's ship. Medicae equipment surrounded his bed, monitoring vitals that looked more like a readout for a malfunctioning machine than a human. The rift? Guts' voice was barely a rasp. Closed. Completely. The daemon was banished, its physical anchor destroyed. Gallus Prime is purged. 4 billion dead, but the corruption is contained. Varrock moved into view. His mechanical eye focused on Guts with clinical interest. You accomplished what a Space Marine chapter would have struggled to achieve. Alone. In less than a day. How long was I out? 3 days. Your injuries were extensive. Catastrophic. Really. You should have died. Multiple times. But your armor. Varrock gestured at Guts's body. It won't let you die. It's fused to you now. Part flesh, part metal, part something else entirely. Our Medicae teams can't remove it, can't even analyze it properly. You've become something between man and machine. Guts looked down at himself. His body was covered in the berserker armor, but it had changed, grown, integrated. Where before it had been plates over flesh, now it was inseparable. He could see sections where metal flowed into muscle, where joints were reinforced with materials that shouldn't exist. What am I? A weapon. The most effective one I've ever seen. Varrock leaned forward. I have reports of 17 other worlds suffering chaos, corruption. Some are early-stage minor incursions that could be handled by conventional forces. Others are advanced, like Gallus Prime was. Daemons walking openly, reality coming apart. And you want me to purge them? Yes. I can offer you resources, ships, soldiers, medical support between deployments. But primarily, I can offer you what you want most. Demons to kill. Endless demons. For as long as you live. Guts was quiet for a long moment. He thought about his world, about Casca, about the Band of the Hawk, about everything he'd lost to demons. All of that was gone now. This universe, the Imperium, had pulled him through the God Hand's attack, saved him from oblivion. Intentional or not, they'd given him a second chance to do what he did best. The people, on Gallus Prime, the survivors I found, did they? The group you gave weapons to, they survived, defended their position until we extracted them. 43 souls saved by your actions. Varrock paused. They ask about you, call you the Black Angel. They want to thank you. Don't need thanks, just need the next target. Already prepared. A hive world called Mortressa. Population 2 billion. Corruption spreading from the lower levels. Suspected Nurgle incursion, plague daemons, disease, death. We need someone to go in before the corruption reaches critical mass. Guts tried to sit up. The berserker armor responded, forcing his damaged body to move. Pain lanced through him, terrible pain, but he'd lived with pain for years. When do I deploy? Varrock smiled without humor. Eager. Good. But you need recovery time first. Even your enhanced biology has limits. How long? 1 week, maybe 2. Give the Medicae teams time to stabilize your condition. Ensure the armor integration won't kill you. Fine. 1 week. Guts looked at Varrock directly. After that, I want constant deployment. No downtime. No rest. Just point me at demons and get out of my way. You'll burn out. Die within months. I've been dead before. Didn't take. Guts leaned back in the medical bed. I don't want glory. Don't want fame. Don't want to be a hero. I just want every demon in this galaxy dead. That's all. That's everything. Varrock studied him for a long moment. You realize what you're committing to? The Imperium spans millions of worlds. Chaos, corruption appears constantly. You could fight for decades and barely make a dent. Good. Gives me something to do. Why? Why commit to eternal war? What drives you? Guts was quiet. He thought about how to answer that. Finally, he spoke. I lost everything to demons. My friends, my lover, my purpose. They took it all. then dragged me to this universe and gave me a galaxy full of new demons to kill. He looked at Varrock. I'm not doing this for your emperor, not doing it for your imperium. I'm doing it because it's what I know. It's what I'm good at. And maybe if I kill enough demons here, it'll make up for the ones I couldn't kill back home. That's a terrible reason to fight. It's the only reason I've got. Varrock nodded slowly. Then welcome to the Inquisition Service, Guts of Midland. Officially, you're designated as a sanctioned asset, an expendable operative deployed against chaos threats. Unofficially, you're exactly what the Imperium needs. A demon killer who asks no questions and accepts no limits. Just point me at them. I will. But know this. Chaos is eternal. You cannot win this war, cannot achieve final victory. The best you can hope for is to hold the line, fight forever, die eventually. Is that enough? Guts thought about the eclipse, about watching his friends die, about holding Casca's broken mind and knowing he'd failed to protect her, about spending years hunting apostles just to feel like he was doing something, anything to fight back against the horror. This was the same. Bigger scale, different demons. Same fight. It's enough, he said finally. I don't need to win. I just need to fight. That's who I am. That's all I am. Then rest. Recover. In 1 week, I'll have your next deployment ready. Varrock turned to leave, then paused. The soldiers who fought with you, Sergeant Kellern and his scions, they want to volunteer for your future operations. They say they've never seen anyone fight like you. They want to learn. Tell them. They don't want to learn. Learning means becoming like me. And no one should want that. I'll tell them you said no. After Varrock left, Guts lay in the medical bed, staring at the ceiling. His body ached. The berserker armor was quiet now, dormant, but he could feel it waiting, ready for the next fight. The next demon. The next war. This wasn't the life he'd wanted. Wasn't the life he'd chosen, but it was the life he had. And he'd live it the only way he knew how, fighting demons until he ran out of demons or ran out of life, whichever came first. 6 days later, Guts stood in the deployment bay of the Unrelenting Truth, fully armored and armed. Dragon Slayer had been repaired, enhanced with metals the tech priests couldn't quite identify. The cannon arm had been rebuilt, upgraded with Imperium technology, and the berserker armor fused to his flesh now had been reinforced with adamantium plating. He was no longer entirely human, not entirely machine, something between, something new. Inquisitor Varrock approached with a data slate. Mortressa awaits. Population 2 billion. Corruption spreading from the underhive. Nurgle's influence confirmed plague daemons, disease vectors, mutated plague zombies. The local PDF is overwhelmed. The planet will fall within days without intervention. What's the deployment strategy? You, alone, drop pod to the corruption epicenter. Kill everything until the corruption source is eliminated. Same as last time then. It will always be the same. We deploy you. Guts nodded. How many worlds after this one? 17 confirmed chaos incursions. Dozens more suspected. And that's just in this sector. Galaxy-wide? Varrock shook his head. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Chaos is eternal. The war never ends. Good. Guts stepped toward the drop pod. I'd hate to run out of work. As tech priests sealed the pod around him, Guts closed his eye and thought about everything that had led to this moment. The eclipse, the God Hand, years of hunting. And now this, an eternal war in a galaxy that wasn't even his own. But it felt right. Felt like purpose. The pod launched toward Mortressa. Below, 2 billion people waited unknowingly for salvation or destruction. And Guts smiled without humor as the pod screamed through atmosphere. Another day, another demon, another fight. This was his life now, and he wouldn't have it any other way. The end.